Hi again then guys, and welcome to episode 14 of GT Masters, the review series for Gran Turismo's strong selection of GT class cars in their various forms. There are some fictional ones, some real ones of say GT1 or GT2 or GT3 classes, and also some vehicles which I will be including for the sake of the series because they fall within similar parameters to many of the GT class cars, but they aren't actually official GT class machines. Vehicles such as the FXX, the Zonda R, the Ferrari, etc. And in this particular episode, of course, as you'll have seen from the thumbnail, we are featuring one of these vehicles. It's one of the most popular cars in the game, one of the fastest cars in the game, the Ferrari FXX. When it was released, it was quite simply the most hardcore Ferrari ever made. Now, it's been surpassed now by the FXX-K, based on the LaFerrari, and hopefully we'll get that car at some point down the line. But for now, this is by far the most hardcore Ferrari that you can get on Gran Turismo. So how does it compare to the other GT class machines? Because the reason why I'm including it is because although it is certainly not a racing car, it's actually a competition spec test vehicle, it shares some very similar style and performance and spec assets as a GT class car. And overall, it's actually quite akin to some of the 90s GT1 machines. But for the sake of the series, we are including it. So what does it have to offer? Well, it's powered by a 6.3 litre V12 engine, which is essentially an evolution of the Enzo's engine, and the car itself is fairly obviously visually based on the Enzo. Underneath, though, there are a major amount of changes compared to the Enzo. It's a completely different machine under the skin. The engine is larger, as we said, at 6.3 litres. It produces 1138 horsepower, which is a lot higher than the Enzo at 979 horsepower, and it also puts out 657 foot-pounds of torque, which is actually pretty high for a Ferrari V12. They don't typically go for torque, so the fact that the car does have that much torque is potentially a good advantage to have. Interestingly, it weighs in at exactly the same weight as yesterday's Roof Yellowbird, 1,064 kilos. And thanks to that low weight, combined with its massive power, it puts out 1,070 horsepower per tonne. Now that's still not as high as something like a Gillett Vertigo, but the advantage of the FXX is that it actually delivers on those specs, whereas something like a Vertigo, it's kind of hard to actually translate that incredible spec into usable performance. It's a good car, but not necessarily as insane as that power to weight would suggest. With the FXX, however, it does actually deliver on that. Now, the FXX was an interesting program. As I said earlier on, it's a competition spec test car, in effect. And basically what that means was customers could buy the car, but they didn't actually keep the car. Ferrari would keep the car, and on certain occasions throughout the year, the owners could race the car against other FXXs on different tracks. So technically, it's kind of a race car, but at the same time not really, because the true purpose of that was that those owners would become, in effect, the next test drivers for Ferrari's next generation of hypercars, or more specifically, supercars, because it's generally accepted that there's no such thing as a hypercar. Those people drove the FXX, and we can surmise to some degree that they had a big say in what the LaFerrari has turned out like, because that is basically Ferrari's next major ultimate supercar. And also, it would be inferred by that as well, the FXX-K, which of course is based on the LaFerrari and is the successor to the FXX. Now, in terms of value for money, the FXX is a 2 million credit machine, so it costs more than most of the Le Mans prototypes in the game, so it's got a lot to live up to as far as a competition machine goes. So does it live up to that? It certainly has the spec, but does it deliver on it? Well, I'm happy to say, yes it does. Interestingly though, it's actually slower than the Enzo for top speed. The Enzo is around 10 miles per hour quicker than the FXX top end. The FXX can do around 285 under its own power, which means that it is the fastest car of this series. Not by a massive margin though, and anyone who's seen my top 10 fastest GT cars video will probably know what the fastest official GT machine in the series is going to be. As far as acceleration, it completely blows everything else in the series out of the water, and I'm not just talking about the fact that it's allowed to have NOS. That is a big advantage, but even without that, the FXX can out-accelerate any of the other cars in this series easily. There is no competition in a straight line. It is the fastest. In terms of handling, well, the Enzo isn't necessarily the best handling of supercars. It's not bad as such, but it's a little bit twitchy, and it kind of steers from the centre in a similar way to the GT6 NSX. Does the FXX accentuate that, or improve it? Well, to some degree it does accentuate it, but with some careful tuning of the diff and the suspension, it can be brought under control, and anyone who's used the FXX will know that it is an extremely rapid competition spec machine. So for 2 million credits, it is one of the most expensive cars of the series, but it's also the fastest, has one of the strongest overall specs in the game, and is one of the fastest cars overall in the game. So, that's it for this episode. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.